Says Sir Patrick Vallance, one of the government's most senior advisers during the COVID pandemic. He has been giving evidence since 10:30 this morning to the UK's public inquiry. And he said that he never thought his diary entries would see the light of day. Let's have a little watch and a listen.
Just on that last point, no intention to publish them or use them as a basis. We've seen various people who were involved in the pandemic, including some of your scientific colleagues, have written memoirs or accounts of their time. Did you think you might draw on these notes?
I had no intention whatsoever of these ever seeing the light of day or me looking at them again, and I sort of felt the world had probably had enough of books of reflections of people's thoughts during COVID.
Well, Sir Patrick Vallance now answering questions. Do you know what I find fascinating, Sam Armstrong, is the way that the barristers asking questions, the way they treat certain people, the way they treat others, the utter disdain with which they've treated some people, like my future guest, Carl Hennigan, sort of like, as if they're sort of like, oh, you silly man, you queried things. The questioning of the so-called experts, the people who are making the decisions. Look, I completely accept that Sir Patrick Vallance is an expert. He was our chief scientific advisor at this time. You know, he's someone who actually I very early on trusted him, along with Chris Whitty, the chief medical officer, when they said, you know, all the things they said in March 2020, where they told us there's no point locking down, it won't work, we're not closing schools, it won't make a difference, and some people are going, you know, everyone's going to pretty much end up getting COVID, and some people are going to die, but most people get a bit sick and then be fine. And they basically said all of that on television, and then spent the next 2 years, along with every government official, basically saying that anyone who pointed that out was a liar and a COVID denier, etc., and a granny killer. They were just as bad as the politicians, as far as I'm concerned. But the way they're treated by the barristers, they're just treated as sort of like, oh, well, everything you did, obviously you had everyone's interests at heart. When they went against things that they had personally said, they went against the scientific evidence again and again and again. They made up the scientific evidence. There doesn't seem to be any proper scrutiny of the decision-making process when, yet again, barristers are talking about who said what about who in a sodding WhatsApp group.
Yeah, and look, as I've said time and time again, the essential allegation being investigated in this inquiry is that the British state was so utterly failed, it was so utterly inept, so utterly unprepared, that dealing with a crisis of all crises, and look, I have my doubts about the response to COVID, but there's no doubt it was the biggest crisis this country had faced in a very long time, that it simply failed to function. It was slow, it was bungling, it was inept. And instead of dealing with the very serious deficiencies identified in the very basis, the structure, the constitution of this country, what are we talking about? Text messages. Did you swear to him? Was that very polite? And
Did you say a rude word about Matt Hancock?
And what we had is Helen McNamara, the Deputy Cabinet Secretary at that time, very serious official who was responsible for delivering much of this, and it failed to happen, held up as this sort of angelic figure, the woman, the only serious one in the room. Whereas, by the way, I hold no truck for Dominic Cummings, Lee Kane and the rest of them who, you know, a lot of things didn't support. But their essential criticism was, look, this is all going to go to Helen Hancock unless we do something about it. And what happened? They were pilloried. Why? For their rude language. She was held up. Why? For being very polite. And there has been no discussion whatsoever of whether the British state is responsible for killing people.
No, exactly.
And or
but by the way, she would have been one of the many people working in the senior levels of the civil service that happily watched their civil servants go to parties during COVID when they were telling the rest of us to stay at home.
She provided the karaoke machine.
She provided the karaoke machine. The idea that these people, again, I've said it before, I've said it again. Look, they didn't put anyone at risk, but that's the whole point. They knew they weren't putting anyone at risk because we weren't allowed. We were working in the office at that time. We were basically told we'd be sacked on the spot if we did anything similar, even though we're working together all day. These people should have been hounded out of public life already. As soon as those first revelations came out, I'm absolutely appalled these people are still taken seriously. But fundamentally, you do have an issue where the debate is about, should we have locked down sooner? Not, should we have locked down? The fact that no one mentioned Sweden. The control study...
Not allowed.
No. Oh, Sweden has loads more people die. No, they didn't. Their excess death rate over the last 3 years of all causes, which is the only thing that matters, of all causes, so you can rule out all of the... why do you decide something's a COVID death or not a COVID death? You can lose all of that nuance and politicisation of COVID death. How many people died more than you would have expected to die over the last few years? Sweden has pretty much got the lowest in the world. Why? Because they didn't lock down.